The associate pastor here at CEFC, and it's so good to be with all of you this morning. Thanks for coming here. We've got a heavier crowd here. I think there's a bunch of people that'll be attending our picnic after this. Is that right? Yeah, all right, sweet. I'm glad to have all you guys here. I hear there's going to be some great barbecue, and I think some really good mashed potatoes and whatever else you guys decided to bring along, so we're pumped about that. It's going to be good. Hey, wanted to tell you a little bit. We're in a message series called Greater, and yeah, so in 1966, this has really not a lot to do with the message, but in 1966, our president at the time, his name was Lyndon B. Johnson. Lyndon B. Johnson decided to create this, it was called the Presidential Achievement Award for people that had done great physical achievements with physical fitness. And so basically what would happen with the Presidential Achievement Award program was that if someone was able to accomplish the certain things that the president had set out for you to do in those years, it was really between 1966 and the 80s, but also was there when I was in high school as well, and maybe some of you guys remember it as well. But if you achieved the certain things that you had to do for the fitness program, you would be given an award. And this is what the awards look like. One of them was the National Physical Fitness Award. And so this award was if you did most of them, but you couldn't quite accomplish everything that was required, you got the National Physical Fitness Patch. But if you were really like a go-getter and you did all of them, you would get the Presidential Physical Fitness Award. And on that one, there was like a little number that showed how many that you had achieved. And so you could definitely rack them up through the years. But I didn't really care a whole lot about it when I was in elementary school, but it became kind of important to me when I was in high school. But let me just show you some of the things you had to accomplish. Here's the chart on how it breaks down. So this went by like age and gender and everything like that. But just for the guys, for the high school seniors that were 17, they had to do 55 curl-ups in under a minute, which wasn't like, I don't know if you guys like do physical fitness now and you're like me, when you do crunch now, you just kind of like get your back off the ground. But back then you had to like sit up the whole way and your elbows had to touch your knees. And the only way for me to accomplish that was somebody was holding my feet down. So like we had to do 55 of those in less than a minute. It was no joke. You also had to run the shuttle run in less than 8.7 seconds. I don't even know how to describe that one. It was just like you'd run and pick up blocks and set them down. You guys remember that shuttle run? Yeah. You're like, woo, yeah. And then you had to do the V-sit reach. You had to reach 7 inches past the end of your feet. I'll explain that in a second. You had to do the 1 mile run in less than 6 minutes and 6 seconds. And you had to do 13 pull-ups. So this was pretty difficult to accomplish all of those things. But like I said, I was really passionate about it. And so like the one that was really, really hard for me was this one, the V-sit reach. Now, I could do the 1 mile run in less than 6 minutes. Actually, I think my high school senior time was 5:56, which I was pretty proud about until I moved to Ohio, and everybody out there cared way more about fitness, and they were like in the 4s. I was like, how is this even possible? Why are you not in the Olympics? But so I ran it in 5:56. I did the 13 pull-ups. I did the shuttle run in 8.7. I did the 55 curl-ups. And the V-sit reach was really difficult. Now, if you don't know what it is, this is what it looked like. It was actually, I think, harder than this. I think my feet were like at the end of this thing. And you literally had to reach 7 inches past the end of your feet. I was talking with Phil about this, our lead pastor. Like, I don't think either of us can reach the end of our feet at this point in time in our lives. But trying to reach 7 inches past was really, really difficult. Even then, it was almost impossible. It was like no way to try and make that happen. So literally, because I wanted to do it so bad, I had somebody sitting on either side of me holding my knees down, and you just kind of reach and stretch as far as you possibly could. And so my freshman year, I got the National Fitness Patch. And then this morning, we took a picture of it just so that I could brag about myself. But this is the number 3 on here on my physical fitness patch. I got 3 of them, my sophomore, my junior, and my senior year. I know, right? Aren't I awesome? But yeah, it was kind of crazy. So it was really fun. But in order to do that, I had to reach farther than I thought was humanly possible. Now, just to take this into the context of what we're talking about today, sometimes in life, some things feel like a reach for us. And it can feel like, if you're asking me to do this, it feels like it's a farther reach than anything else I've ever tried to accomplish before. For instance, if I asked some of you guys to listen to hip-hop music, you'd be like, nah, that's too far of a reach for me. I'm a country boy. We don't listen to music like that, right? Just give me Taylor Swift. So some of you guys, no thank you for hip-hop music. Another one might be like, if I said to you, here's a plate of vegetables, I want you to eat all of them. Some of you would go, no, that's too far of a reach. I can't eat all of those vegetables. Give me some meat, maybe some potatoes, right, guys? That's what I'll eat, but not the vegetables. Or maybe if we said, oh, okay, this situation, because this happened to me and my wife. When we tried to feed my son a carrot one time, he literally, I think I said this to you guys before, he threw up all over the table at dinner time. And so you might be the one that cleans it up, or you might be the one that's like, that's too far a reach, I'm out of here. Because as soon as your son or daughter starts throwing up, you start dry heaving and you can't handle it and you got to run away and hide. Or maybe you're one of those people that like in your house, like, you wear your clothes, and then the place where you store your clothes is on the couch. And so, like, instead of the clothes being in the closet, there's this giant mound of clothes in there. And if I said to you, hey, is it too far of a reach for you to put them away? You'd be like, but they're easier to find right here on the couch. And so, yeah, that's too far of a reach to put them away. But, in, like, relationships, when you start thinking about how sometimes relationships can get broken, whether that's an argument that you had with someone or an altercation or someone that you don't really like, it can seem like sometimes in our lives and our human interactions, our relationships get broken. And when that happens, we can get to a place where it's really too far of a reach for us to try and mend those relationships. In fact, sometimes just to see someone or to hear their voice or to even think about trying to mend fences with them can seem impossible. And sometimes when there's pain involved for that, it can get to a point where we begin to justify our bad behavior. For instance, we might say, it's okay, they deserve it. Or they won't call me, so I won't be calling them. Or they won't listen to me, so I don't need to listen to them. What are we talking about here? Or because they haven't come in my direction 90%, so I'm not going in their direction 10%. And sometimes when relationships are broken, it's like, no, that's too far. I'm not going to reach. I'm not going to try to fix it. And we begin to justify our behavior, and we begin to say that it's okay for me to do things that I might normally not be willing to do. But because of pain, and because of the pain that's interacting between me and this other person, I justify my bad behavior. They hurt me, so I hurt them. They spoke bad about me, so I speak bad about them. They started it, so I finish it. Yeah, I finish it. Can't just let this thing undone. Now, just to give you an illustration, I used to work in youth ministry. I'm the associate pastor now here, but I did youth ministry for like 12 years at this church and 8 at another. So I've got 20 years of student ministry. And when you're a youth pastor and you're working with people's kids, sometimes you have interactions or run-ins with their parents. In fact, if you work in education or anything like that, then you might have had run-ins with kids' parents and everything like that that sometimes can not be the most fun. And I had this one time, this mom that came to me, and she sat me down because she wanted to yell at me good, and she told me, hey, it's your fault that my daughter is eating candy because you feed her candy at youth group, and she's gaining weight because of the candy you feed her. And I thought to myself, I think you have the wrong idea of what I do at youth. It's not like she finishes a candy bar and I hand her another one and be like, now come on, eat that one. I mean, really, I sell the candy. You give them the money to come buy it. But it was an interesting perspective because in that moment, I got the email and I was upset about it. And it's hard not to then take the attack that you get from something like that and then to go talk about them in a private circle and talk bad about them and slander them, and I can justify that. Hey, this is something stupid about me in this email, so now let me tell you how bad they are, right? And I can easily walk down that road with passive aggression. And sometimes if you've had that happen where you go down the road of passive aggressiveness, it's like, I have no problem now slandering them on social media, because they're not reading it anyway, and I won't name their name, but I'm going to talk bad about them behind their back, and we can justify it because they hurt me. I might send them a mean text and kind of drop the mic in this situation and just say, hey, you said that about me, so this is where we're at right now. I can gossip, I can threaten you, I can even avoid you because of the things that you've said to me or the things that you've done to me. And we begin to justify our behavior. And when hurt happens to us, it's like it's on. In fact, if somebody says to me, you should forgive them, it's like, no, I don't really want to forgive them. I'm not going to forgive them. I'm going to hold on to this one myself, and I'm going to stay justified. That reach feels too far, and I might even say to you, I'm justified in this, right, guys? I'm justified. It's okay that I treat them this way because of what they did to me. Now, the question is, how do we get there? What is that based on? Why do we think that it's okay for us to treat someone that way or respond to someone that way? When hurt and pain comes into our life and our relationship's broken, why do I get to the point where I feel justified to hurt someone back or justified to do that? Now, as we began this series last week called Greater, Phil began to talk to us, our lead pastor, began to talk to us about this sermon, this message that Jesus was giving. And he explained to us last week, he may not have been standing on a mount like it historically says. He said maybe that Jesus was standing on a plane and giving us the sermon on the plane, which is kind of cool. But either way, Jesus, in this message that he was giving, he pushed us to act greater than the status quo. He pushes us to reach farther than we ever thought was humanly possible. In fact, in every little statement that Jesus makes in this message, it's just like, go farther, reach farther, push farther than you thought you possibly could. And he dials it in this week when it comes to like some of the things we're supposed to do when it comes to our enemies. So I thought we might take a second and listen to what Jesus has to say. So let's check this out. It says, "But to you who are listening, I say." Now, before we go on, I think I just want to stop there because I know that sometimes in the beginning of a message, you can dial out, especially because I'm not Phil. I'm the guy that speaks like every other couple weeks, and so you go, he's talking too fast, and I'm done listening. But I want to challenge you guys to not just say, I'm only listening to this guy who's standing up here. I want to listen to the words of Jesus. And maybe you're feeling tired because you stayed up too late watching Penn State last night. Anybody? Yeah, I know who you are. Yeah, I stayed up late too. It was a great game though. I'm not gonna lie, it was awesome. We are Penn State. But at this point in time, we want to listen to Jesus' words, okay? We want to hear what God has to say because sometimes it's easy for us to glaze past these words, especially if you're like me. When I first started attending here, I was 4, and now I'm 42. So it's really easy sometimes for us to like hear a passage of Scripture that we've heard 1,000 times. Maybe you're brand new to church, and this is the first time you hear it, and that's awesome. I'd love to hear it through your ears. But for many of us, we have to really try and dig in and dial in what Jesus is saying. And so I don't want you to miss this. This is a passage that's familiar, but it's life-changing if we apply it. So let's listen. To you who are listening, I say, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you and pray for those who mistreat you. See, already when we get into this passage, we start to see Jesus is asking us to do something that's completely different than what the world would tell us to do. Because the world would say, they hurt you, you hurt them. The world would say, they're mean to you, you're mean to them. But Jesus tries to grab a hold of us and say, let's be greater. And let's do something different. And he talks completely differently. And already, if you're willing to hear what Jesus has to say, it's already pushing. It's already pushing all of our little individual buttons. He continues and says this. If someone slaps you on one cheek, just listen to this. If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to the other one also. Well, what? I mean, that literally means if someone hurts you, let them continue. If someone takes your coat, don't withhold your shirt from them. So if someone steals from you, let them take more. I mean, in today's day and age, I think of it like this. If somebody came to my house and they robbed me, I might go up to the robber and say to them, hey, come on back here. You missed the good stuff. I hide all the good stuff in this closet right here. I mean, come on and take some more. I mean, that's literally what it feels like Jesus is saying right here. That we're to completely change the way that we think about enemies or people that hurt us. He continues, give to everyone who asks, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. It's powerful words that Jesus is saying here, but I think when we see this, we realize that Jesus is talking in extremes. He's using the word enemies here. And so when we think of an enemy, it's an extreme. Because he's not saying, do unto your family members as your family members need, right? It's like, if my family member hurts me, I can forgive pretty quickly. Maybe they didn't mean it, or maybe I can just move on, or I can let it go, and that's okay. Even like a stranger that accidentally cut me off in traffic, I can maybe forgive them, and I can move on. But when it comes to our enemy, we're talking about someone that we despise in our life, someone that may or may not have hurt us. Maybe it's a public figure. And so this is an individual that we despise. It's on the other end of the spectrum. And when Jesus is giving us advice about this, he's not talking about the one that's easy to love and forgive. He's talking about the one that's way over on the other side. And my natural conclusion to this is, if he's telling me that's how I should treat my enemy, it also means that that's how I should treat everyone from family to enemy, everyone in between. That not just should I treat my enemy that way, but I should go as far as to treat my enemy this way. That I should treat them as I would want them to be treating me, and not to be paying back to them at all, to go way far out of the way. In other words, Jesus is telling us that sometimes it makes sense to us, it makes sense in our minds. Hate is justified. But he's telling us that's not my way. The world might justify your hate, and everyone might say, it's okay, and you deserve to get them back. And Jesus would say, that's not my way. It's not my way. So he goes on. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. See, Jesus is saying, look, if you're willing to give to people that you know you're going to get money back, and you're willing to lend to your friends, he's just like, everybody does that. You're not doing anything. You're just doing status quo. You're just doing what comes very, very naturally to you. Yeah, of course you're going to lend to somebody if you know you're going to get it back. Jesus is like, what credit is that to you? What have you done that's actually extreme? What have you done that's good? See, followers, listen, if we join together and we call ourselves a follower of Jesus, this is different. I'm labeling myself as a Christian. We're not talking about this quote-unquote fire insurance here where I pray a prayer and now I'm saved from hell. We're talking about I've made a decision to follow Jesus. I want to walk in his way. And when I walk in his way, it looks different. Now, I know that not everybody in the room has decided to be a follower of Jesus. So for the rest of the time in this message, this might be great advice to you if you haven't considered yourself as a follower of Jesus. It's good advice. But if we're a follower of Jesus, then it's not good advice. This is what God's telling us to do. And I almost consider like if God's telling me to do it and I don't do a command that God says, then I'm living in sin. This is something that he says followers are different than the rest of the world. What credit is it to you if you act like everybody else and you just are kind to people that are kind to you? That's easy. That's not what followers go farther than that. They do more. And so he continues on and kind of describes what it looks like to be a follower. He says, but you love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High God, because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. So be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. I mean, Jesus is saying to us, the level of example is completely different. And if I want to call myself a follower or a child of the Most High God, as Jesus puts it in here, then we have to look different than the status quo and different than the rest of the world. See, for me, if I want to be a follower of Jesus, I need to love my enemies. I need to do good to them. I need to lend to them, not expecting to get anything back. I'm treating them like a best friend. I'm showing mercy because that's exactly what my Father has done as an example. He showed mercy where there was no mercy deserved. He showed grace when we were just his enemies. And so he says, if you want to call yourself someone that walks in my footsteps, if you want someone to look at you and say, now that's a follower of Jesus, then our life should be exemplified by a different set of rules and behavior than just status quo. The way that we treat people from family to enemy and all in between says that I'm supposed to reach farther than I ever thought possible when it comes to the grace and love and forgiveness that I show to people around me. And not only should I attempt it, it's a have to if I'm a follower of Jesus. Now, I think on paper, as we read that, it kind of makes sense until you begin to imagine a person that you hate. And I think if we were to do this for a second, just like take a second and think about this. Who is a person right now that I have a real hard time with? Maybe this is a person that hurt you. Maybe this is a person that stole from you. Maybe this is a person that abandoned you. Maybe it's a public figure that you just can't stand the way that they are acting. And for whatever reason, in your minds, they're considered an enemy. and for you to not hate them is really, really hard. It's really, really hard. And as soon as we write it down or bring it out in front and all of a sudden we can see it, we go, oh yeah, this is harder than it looks. It's not just words up here that Jesus is asking us to do. This is difficult. And so I thought, what about with that person in mind and the infraction that they've done to you, the infraction in our hearts like on display? What if we imagined ourselves having a conversation with Jesus and kind of tried to rationalize with Jesus why it's okay for us to justify our behavior? You know, like say we're talking to Jesus and we're like, so Jesus, they beat me up, so I'm good to beat them up, right, Jesus? Or Jesus, they stole from me, so I'm good to go and get every penny back, right? And if they don't give it back to me, I can threaten them, right, Jesus? I mean, isn't that okay, Jesus? Or they hurt my family, Jesus. My son got hurt because of them. So I'm okay to destroy them and their reputation, right? Jesus, that's okay because it's justified, right? I have a different opinion on masking than them, Jesus, so I'm okay to slander them publicly, right? Right, Jesus? Or I don't agree with them politically, so I'm okay to hate them. Aren't I, Jesus? And I just wonder if we're standing there talking this out with Jesus, similarly as many of you have done as parents, when your kids try to rationalize something with you when they're justifying their behavior. And you look at them, and the longer you stare at them, they just kind of go, yeah, I know. And you ask Jesus, how far though? How far am I supposed to reach? How far should I go for them? Because think about how much they've hurt me. And think about how much the pain they brought in my life. And Jesus goes, he just lets you think about it for a second. And then he extends one arm out to the right. And you can see this hole that's in his hand. And he extends his other arm to the other side and says, is this far enough to reach, guys? Does this look far enough? Because while you were considered my enemies, I went to a cross for you. And while you did nothing to earn forgiveness, I gave it freely. And when you were my enemies, I didn't hold back any of my rights. I laid them all down for you. So how far are you going to reach for your enemies? And I think when we have that perspective in our mind, all of a sudden we go, okay. If I want to follow Jesus, that's what it looks like. And I don't have a whole lot of justification. In fact, if I want to boil down the justification that I have when it comes to my behavior, it's boiled down in this statement. I'm justified by God to love. I'm justified by God to love. If I call myself a follower of Jesus, I have one justification. I'm not justified by my pain to hurt somebody back or to hate them. I'm not justified by my anger to hurt them. I'm not justified by my past to blame them. I'm not justified by my actions to react. I'm justified by God to love. And if I call myself a follower of Jesus, then that is the thing that I can reason all day long. That I can say, well, you know what? They did this to me, but I need to love. And that's the only loophole that Jesus gives us, is one to look through, one to walk through. It's not to make our way out of any of it, because he gives an example of enemies as the example of how far I'm supposed to go when it comes to love. In fact, it doesn't mean, and I need to say this, it doesn't mean that it negates your pain. And it doesn't mean that all of us haven't felt pain in reality. All of this actually is negating the fact that it doesn't give me a right at all. I'm not justified for any self-justice. It doesn't give me a right to go back and hurt someone because they've hurt me. So if you've experienced pain, you deserve all the care and all the love and all the counseling you need to work through that. It just doesn't put us in a place where we can take it back out on somebody else. It just doesn't. Not according to Jesus if I'm a follower. That's a completely different thing. In fact, followers, they kind of look like this. Followers consider themselves the least. According to Jesus, if I want to consider what my position is, I'm supposed to make everybody greater than myself. I'm supposed to be the least. I'm supposed to let myself have no privileges over you. to consider myself less than you every time. And followers, they're supposed to lay down their rights. Followers are not the ones slamming their fists down on the table saying, I demand this. No, followers are laying down their rights for the sake of others. That's what a follower does. And followers, they pay for others. Because as Jesus' example, he didn't demand that I pay for my own sin. He came and he paid for it himself. So a follower of Jesus does the same. I pay for others. I stand in the gap for them. I fight for them. This is what the life of a follower does, and it looks different than what everybody else on this world is going to say is okay. That is what we're supposed to do, and my reach is supposed to be farther when it comes in someone else's direction than I thought I possibly could. And the only way that I can possibly reach in that direction is if I have the Holy Spirit holding down my knees so that I can reach farther, right? I need God to hold me and push me so that I can be different. And I can be different than what the rest of the world is expecting our behavior to be. So, just to wrap this up, just to come back to that person that you have a struggle with, that person that you're hating right now, that person that you have a hard time not feeling like you just want to crush them. To give a couple examples. So in relationship to some bad behavior that you have with that relationship, where you said to them, they said this to me, so I can say this to them, or they've done this to me. I would just push you on one thing. Okay, as a follower of Jesus, I would say, not so with you, follower, you're called to love. We might be trying to justify our hate or our actions, but that can't be you. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're called to love. And maybe when it comes to your painful past that you're justifying your hate, and you're thinking, they hurt me, so they should X, Y, and Z, and maybe you feel justified to think of how they can experience pain, I would just push you in by saying, not so with you, follower, you're called to love. If we call ourselves followers of Jesus, I'm not called to justify my own pain. I'm called to one thing, and to love. And maybe if you're thinking to yourselves, who is the person you're slamming your fist down on the table, demanding your rights, saying, I live in a free country, so I can fill in the blank. I would just say, not so with you, follower. You're called to love, because followers lay down their rights for the sake of other human beings, as far as to say, I even love my enemy. And so wherever you're all at with that, I would say, look, I understand. It feels much more right to hate than it does to love. But I have to ask you this one question. If you called yourself a follower of Jesus and you've been a part of this Christian thing for a while, whoever lied to you and told you that following Jesus would feel right? It doesn't feel right. It feels counterintuitive. Everything in me says I should pay someone back for what they've done to me. Following Jesus doesn't feel right. It feels the opposite of right. And I'm sure it didn't feel right to Jesus to die for me. And following him doesn't feel right. It gives up its rights. It lays down its rights. It says, you're more important than I am. And if the world is going to experience Jesus, he's not going to come back tomorrow and set another example. See, he already came 2,000 years ago and he did that. And so now what the world is going to see when they see Jesus is you and me. And if they're going to see Jesus, they're going to see him because we've decided to follow. And we've emulated his behavior. And I got to say, I believe the world is desperate, and I mean desperate, to see someone that lives and acts like the behavior of our Savior. And when they see it, will they see Jesus? Will they see him when they see you? Because that's what the world needs to see. And I got to stop justifying my own bad behavior for the sake of my own rights and start laying down my rights for the sake of other people, even my enemies. Would you pray with me? Jesus, I just ask that you would continue to move in my heart, because I'm convicted by this. I'm convicted by the fact that it's really, really hard to love my enemies. It's even hard to love people that have offended me personally, and I feel like sometimes I'm just justifying my bad behavior. So God, I just ask that you'd move in my heart today, that you'd help me to see the places that I've been justifying it and stop making excuses for myself. And Lord, for everyone else that might be struggling with this or dealing with this in their own way, I know that probably their pain is much harder to excuse than the pain that I've even experienced in my life. And I know that sometimes it seems impossible. And I know that the possibility of saying I forgive you, or the possibility of loving someone after the damage they've done to us, it's so far of a reach that we can't do it humanly. In fact, even to say I love you to them would feel like something that sounds like a reckless thing to do, and an abandonment of self. But God, by your Spirit, I pray that you convict us to that. so that when someone experiences me, they experience the same kind of love that I would have experienced when I felt you hanging on a cross for my sin. There is nothing but abandon when I think about you. And there's nothing but a reckless thought that you said, I'm going to give up everything. I'm going to chase after them. And it doesn't matter what they did and what they've done and who they are and how much they've hurt me and how much scorn you had to pay, you went there anyway. And the reach that you extended with your hands was farther than I can imagine. If I can just be a piece of that reflecting your love, God. Just a piece. Maybe the world would see you a little bit brighter than they did before. Pray that you move in all of us, God. It's in your name we pray.